Just letting you know right now, this is going to be one of the toughest videos that I've ever made. Probably because it tackles one of the toughest passages of scripture in the entire Bible. And just to be fair, I don't even know that I can answer it adequately, but I'm going to do my best. Deuteronomy chapter 21, starting in verse 18, is a very rough passage of scripture to read, but let's read it together. Starting in verse 18, suppose a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father and mother even though they discipline him. In such a case, the father and mother must take the son to the elders as they hold court at the town gate. His parents must say to the elders, This son of ours is stubborn and rebellious and refuses to obey. He's a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of this town must stone him to death. In this way, you will purge this evil from among you, and all Israel will hear about it and be afraid. Two questions that I want to do my best to answer in the video. First and foremost, was this actually happening? And second, probably more importantly, how could a loving God write such a drastic law? You know, Matthew Poole, born 1624 through 1679, he's a prominent 17th century English Puritan theologian. He quotes this: "Yet the Jews say this law was never put into practice, and therefore it might be made for terror and prevention, and to render the authority of parents more sacred and powerful." You know, ultimately, we don't know if this ever happened. There's never a biblical narrative of it happening, but that doesn't mean that it didn't. But hopefully and potentially, this law was put in place to place a new level of seriousness in regards to rebelling against your parents and ultimately God. When we arrive at question number 2, which again, as a reminder, is how could such a loving God have such a harsh law? I think that there's a few big things to consider. First and foremost, the son is not a child. We know this because of the descriptive language in Deuteronomy chapter 21. The terms glutton and drunkard imply an adult and a violent and delinquent adult. Not a teenager refusing to do his chores, not a toddler refusing to do something that his parents asked. This is a grown adult choosing to rebel against his parents, community, and ultimately God. Definitely not a child. Now, here's the second thing to consider. Parents could not execute him themselves. Sounds like a weird thing to consider, but David Guzik writes this in his commentary regarding this passage of scripture. It's important to note that the parents could not, by themselves, carry out this penalty. They had to bring the son on trial before impartial judges. Now, this contrasts ancient Greek and Roman law, which gave fathers the absolute right of death over their children. This was a control of parental authority more than it was an exercise of it. Very interesting. Here's, in my mind, the big thing to consider, and we have to flip all the way to Deuteronomy chapter 29 to fully grasp it. Starting in verse 1, God says this: "If you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully keep all his commandments that I'm giving you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the world. You will experience all these blessings if you obey the Lord your God." God is saying to Israel, if you obey me, if you follow all my commandments, I have no choice but to bless you. He promises to do so. But then something turns in verse 15. God says this: "If you refuse to listen to the Lord your God and do not obey all the commandments and decrees I'm giving you today, all these curses will come and overwhelm you. And then there's a laundry list of curses that would follow. Here's what I want to talk about. A rebellious son at that time would have absolutely known and understood God's promises. He would have known that if Israel would obey, they would be blessed, and if they would rebel, they would be cursed. By rebelling against his parents, ultimately this son is saying, I desire for God to curse you and the entire nation. Now, ultimately, we know that this law was never meant to be long-standing. That's why in Luke 15, we arrive at one of my favorite passages of Scripture, the prodigal son. It's the story about a Deuteronomy chapter 21 son running away, rebelling against his parents, and then coming back home. And the father, instead of stoning the son, runs to the son and embraces the son. You know, it was always the intent of God for the son to have relationship with the Father. Listen, if this video helped, if this added any value to your life, be sure to hit subscribe, and maybe I missed something, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.